I've been wanting to preach this. We have next door. Oh, there you see my plants there. See if you can see that. Cars at a church next door. See if I can. So I think that's maybe visible. There's a church, and there are the cars. So, Paul says, I was pretty set. I had things set up just the way I wanted them, and I didn't want to lose them. He said, I was a Hebrew of Hebrews. Or he said a Hebrew of Hebrews, he referred to himself as. He said, circumcised on the 8th day of the tribe of Benjamin. As for legalistic righteousness, faultless. And that is what I'm trying to get through. As to legalistic false righteousness, faultless. But those things, he says, I counted as profit, I now count as loss. So, this perfection he had, even according to the law, that he had kept the law. He said, whatever I count as my profit, you say, oh, I follow all the rules. This reminds me of somebody. Probably, I say it reminds me of several people. But I kept the rules. I did what God wanted me to do. And he said, whatever I counted as profit, I now count as loss. Because Paul was still a sinner, but he counted himself as having kept the law. Whatever I count as my profit, I now count as loss, he said. In fact, I count everything loss. He was a Pharisee, legalistic righteousness, faultless. I count everything loss. Except for the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ, for whom I've lost all things. He said, I count them as rubbish, that I might gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law. He says that for Christ, he had lost all things. As for the legalistic groups he was a part of, he counted that as rubbish, included being a Pharisee. And you were either a Pharisee, a Sadducee, or they said you were an Essene, which I think was supposed to be a smaller group. But he considered that loss. So I decided, long ago that I would go to church. That would be a profit to me. But you've got people over there congratulating themselves on how holy they are and trolling for women or men or, God forbid, other things, which he allows people to do. And congratulating themselves on how holy they are while they're doing it. Then the disciples of John came to him asking, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" They said to Jesus, you need to fit in with the establishment religion. This reminds me, somebody told me he was a pastor's son. And, all those cars. Told me he was a pastor's son on YouTube. And let's just call him Louisiana hot sauce. And he's a young man whose main objective is not Christ at all. Paul said that I might gain Christ. I consider them rubbish that I might gain Christ. Then the disciples of John came to him asking, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast?" So John's disciples were fasting. John was fasting. The Pharisees were fasting. And they said, well, look, even John is fasting. The Pharisees are fasting. Established religion is fasting. The alternative religious scene is fasting with John. But your disciples do not fast. And Jesus said to them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? So, the groom in a wedding is happy, and the attendants can't mourn at that time, But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast.